The massive Xylaxian warship Dominance hung in Earth's orbit like a metallic thundercloud, its crystalline hull refracting sunlight in mesmerizing patterns. Commander Vexthor stood at the bridge's observation deck, his iridescent scales shifting from deep purple to midnight blue as he contemplated the planet below. 3 sets of arms crossed over his ceremonial armor as he watched the supposedly primitive world rotating beneath them. "Hardly seems worth the effort," he muttered to his second-in-command, Navigator Krill. "These humans have barely reached their moon, yet the High Council insists we evaluate them for galactic citizenship." Krill's antenna twitched nervously as she adjusted the neural interface controlling the ship's navigation systems. "The reports from other species are concerning, Commander. They say humans have an unusual capacity for endurance and adaptation. Several assessment teams have already failed." Vexthor's scales rippled with amusement. Failed? To evaluate a species that still burns fossil fuels? Nonsense. We'll complete this assessment and be back for the Galactic Federation's annual feast before the third moon rises. The bridge crew maintained a respectful silence, though several exchanged worried glances. Everyone had heard the stories. The Arcturians' failed strength test, the Proxima Centaurians' botched intelligence evaluation, the Syrians' disastrous attempt at a cultural exchange. Something about humans defied conventional assessment methods. Hours later, Vexthor led a small delegation to the designated meeting point, a location called Big Dave's Wing Shack, in a city humans called Houston. The establishment's garish neon signs and rustic appearance did little to impress the alien commander. They were greeted by a human female who introduced herself as Ambassador Jessica Thompson, though her casual attire, jeans, and a t-shirt with the restaurant's logo seemed inappropriately informal for a diplomatic meeting. "Welcome to Earth," Jessica said with a warm smile. "We thought we'd start with something fun before getting into the formal evaluation protocols." Vexthor's scales shifted to a skeptical orange. "We are here to assess your species' worthiness for galactic citizenship, not for fun." "Of course," Jessica replied, her smile never wavering. "But we believe the best way to understand a species is to share a meal together. We've prepared our finest delicacy for you." The commander followed her to a private room, where several plates of small reddish objects sat steaming on the table. The aroma was unlike anything in the vast database of known galactic cuisines. "These are our famous ghost pepper wings," Jessica explained, taking the seat. "They're a testament to humanity's ability to adapt and overcome. You see, capsaicin, the compound that makes them spicy, is technically a defense mechanism that plants evolved to avoid being eaten. Humans not only learned to tolerate it, but came to enjoy it." Vexthor's chief scientist, Dr. Zix, scanned the food with his handheld analyzer. "Fascinating. The molecular structure suggests no immediate toxicity to our species. A simple food challenge," Vexthor scoffed. "This is hardly a meaningful test of our capabilities. We Xylaxians have evolved to process complex molecular compounds that would dissolve lesser beings." Jessica's smile took on a subtle edge. "Then you should have no problem participating in our little tradition. We find it builds character." The commander picked up one of the wings with his upper right hand, his scales now showing patterns of confident gold. The rest of his delegation watched intently as he took a large bite. For exactly 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then Vexthor's scales exploded into a riot of colors never before seen in Xylaxian biology. His eyes widened to their maximum aperture, and all 6 of his arms began to tremble. "Is everything all right, Commander?" Jessica asked innocently, casually eating a wing herself. "Would you like some milk?" Vexthor tried to respond, but his universal translator seemed to be malfunctioning, producing only a series of high-pitched squeals. Dr. Zix frantically rechecked his readings as the commander's scales began to strobe like a malfunctioning disco ball. "Impossible," Dr. Zix muttered, his own antenna curling in distress. "The compound is interfacing with our biological systems in ways that defy our understanding of chemistry." The rest of the delegation watched in horror as their mighty commander, veteran of 1,000 space battles, conqueror of the Crab Nebula, began to hop from foot to foot while making sounds that would haunt their nightmares for cycles to come. Jessica calmly sipped her beer. "You know, these are just the medium-hot ones. Would you like to try our extra spicy version?" These Alaxian delegation's return to the Dominance was considerably less dignified than their departure. Commander Vexthor, his scales still flickering between alarming shades of red and purple, stumbled onto the teleportation pad while clutching a gallon of milk provided by the eerily helpful humans. Behind him, Dr. Zix frantically waved a medical scanner over the rest of the crew, all of whom showed signs of severe capsaicin-induced distress. "Get me to the medical bay immediately," Vexthor gasped, his universal translator struggling to keep up with his labored breathing. "And someone explain how a species that hasn't even achieved faster-than-light travel has managed to weaponize their food." The ship's medical officer, Dr. Rylus, was waiting for them in the sterile white chamber of the medical bay. Her bioluminescent markings pulsed with concern as she observed the commander's condition. "Fascinating," she muttered, examining the readings on her diagnostic panel. "The compound is actually bonding with your scale pigmentation cells. I've never seen anything like it." "Less fascination, more treatment," Vexthor demanded, all 6 arms wrapped around his midsection. The human female called it Ghost Pepper. Fitting name. I feel like I'm about to become one. Dr. Rylus administered a series of standard detoxification procedures, but the readings only grew more alarming. "Sir, the capsaicin molecules appear to be replicating. They're using your body's natural defense mechanisms to spread throughout your system." Navigator Krill, who had wisely declined to participate in the food challenge, stood at attention near the medical bay's entrance. "Commander, perhaps we should consider requesting assistance from the humans. They seemed quite familiar with managing these effects." "Never," Vexthor declared, though the authority of his statement was somewhat undermined by the high-pitched squeak in his voice. "We are Xylaxians. We do not ask primitive species for help with their primitive biological weapons." At that moment, a strange gurgling sound emanated from the commander's 4th stomach, and his scales began to emit a faint glow. Dr. Rylus's eyes widened as she checked her instruments. "Sir, the compound is causing an unusual reaction with your bioluminescent properties. The energy readings are off the charts." Throughout the massive ship, crew members began to notice something odd. The normally pristine crystalline corridors took on a reddish tinge, and the environmental controls started reporting unexpected temperature fluctuations. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Vorks watched in disbelief as the ship's quantum harmonizers began to resonate at frequencies that shouldn't have been possible. "Bridge to engineering." Navigator Krill's voice crackled over the comm system. "Are you seeing these power fluctuations?" "Affirmative," Vorks replied, his tentacles dancing over multiple control panels at once. "Something's interfering with the crystal matrix. It's as if the ship itself is getting hot." Back in the medical bay, Dr. Rylus made a startling discovery. "Commander, your natural bioluminescence is somehow amplifying the capsaicin's energy signature. It's creating a cascading reaction throughout your body's crystalline structure. The same structure that's biologically compatible with our ship's systems." Vexthor, now glowing bright enough to cast shadows, groaned in realization. "The neural interface, our biological connection to the ship's controls, is spreading the effect throughout the entire vessel," Dr. Rylus finished grimly. "The ghost pepper isn't just affecting you anymore, sir. It's affecting the entire ship." The implications hit harder than a supernova. The Dominance, pride of the Xylaxian fleet, with its revolutionary biocrystal technology that allowed for seamless integration between crew and ship, was effectively experiencing its own case of cosmic heartburn. Alarms began blaring throughout the vessel as various systems reported unprecedented anomalies. The hydroponics bay reported their carefully cultivated space algae was suddenly sprouting Earth-like peppers. The quantum computer started solving equations in Scoville units. Even the ship's universal translator began randomly inserting the word spicy into every third sentence. Status report. Vexthor demanded, trying to maintain some semblance of command despite now resembling a bioluminescent disco ball. Navigator Krill consulted her neural interface, then immediately regretted it as the spice effect transferred through the connection, causing her antenna to curl like party favors. The ship's crystal matrix is resonating with the capsaicin frequency, sir. We're seeing unprecedented energy readings in all systems. And, sir, I believe the ship is developing a craving for milk. Dr. Zix, who had been analyzing data from his initial scans, looked up with an expression of scientific horror. Commander, I've identified the fundamental problem. These ghost peppers, they're not just spicy by our standards. They're registering on the same frequency as our quantum communication systems. Every time we try to process the sensation, we're actually broadcasting it through the ship's neural network. A junior officer burst into the medical bay, all four eyes wide with panic. Commander, the replication systems are malfunctioning. They're producing nothing but various types of dairy products. Vexthor, his mighty frame now curled into a fetal position, while glowing like a supernova, managed to croak out one last order. Send a message to Earth. Tell Ambassador Thompson. Tell her we need more milk. The next 12 hours aboard the Dominance could only be described as controlled chaos, with a steadily decreasing amount of control. The ship's crystalline corridors pulsed with an angry red glow that perfectly matched the complexion of its suffering crew members. In the main engineering section, Chief Engineer Vorks orchestrated a desperate symphony of emergency repairs while trying to ignore the fact that his tentacles had developed a distinct burning sensation. The quantum harmonizers are completely out of sync, he reported to the bridge, his voice crackling with static and the occasional hiccup. Every time we try to stabilize one system, another goes haywire. The ship's neural network is treating the capsaicin infection like a new operating system. On the bridge, Navigator Krill watched in horror as the main view screen began displaying what appeared to be cooking show recipes instead of star charts. The ship's artificial intelligence, normally a model of cold efficiency, had started offering helpful suggestions like, "Have you considered a nice yogurt-based dipping sauce?" And warning, approaching potentially mild sector of space. Would you like to add some jalapenos? Status report from the hydroponics bay, announced Lieutenant Zix, whose scales had taken on a fascinating polka dot pattern. The artificial gravity is fluctuating in time with what the Earth database identifies as salsa music, and all our food synthesizers are now producing only various types of hot sauce. Commander Vexthor, still confined to the medical bay and glowing bright enough to be seen from the planet's surface, managed to croak out orders through the communication system. Tell engineering to disconnect the neural interface network. We need to prevent further spread of His voice trailed off into a series of undignified whimpers as another wave of spice-induced hallucinations hit him. Dr. Rylas, monitoring his condition, shook her head in amazement. Sir, your body temperature is now high enough to qualify as a small sun. On the bright side, we could probably use you as a backup reactor core. The attempt to disconnect the neural network proved futile. The capsaicin had thoroughly integrated itself into the ship's systems. In fact, the more they tried to suppress it, the more creative the ship became in expressing its newfound appreciation for Earth cuisine. The weapons system began recalibrating itself to measure blast power in Scoville units. The teleportation pad would only transport subjects if they were holding some form of dairy product. The ship's exterior defense shield started generating patterns that looked suspiciously like dancing chili peppers. In the science lab, Dr. Zix led a team of increasingly desperate researchers in trying to understand their predicament. It's fascinating, really, he explained to anyone who would listen, his antenna twitching spasmodically. The ghost pepper compound isn't just affecting our biology. It's somehow teaching our technology to appreciate spicy food. The ship's quantum eye has developed taste buds. The situation reached a new level of absurdity when the ship's communication officer discovered that all outgoing messages were being automatically translated into hot sauce recipes. Their distress signal to the Zalaxian High Council had somehow become a detailed instruction manual for crafting the perfect five-alarm chili. "We've lost control of the environmental systems," reported a junior engineer, his scales flashing warning colors. "The air recyclers are now adding what they call aromatherapy. The entire deck smells like a Tex-Mex restaurant." The ship's medical database, meanwhile, had begun diagnosing every ailment as insufficient spice tolerance and prescribing increasingly potent pepper varieties as treatment. Dr. Rillis had to physically disconnect her medical scanners when they started suggesting ghost pepper suppositories as a cure-all. In the ship's massive data core, the quantum AI was experiencing what could only be described as a culinary awakening. It had started cross-referencing the entire history of Zalaxian space exploration with Earth's Food Network programming, drawing some rather unusual conclusions about the role of capsaicin in galactic diplomacy. The main computer has just declared Mexican food as the most advanced form of technology in the known universe, Lieutenant Zix announced, staring at his console in disbelief. "It's reorganizing our entire database around something called the 5 levels of spice enlightenment." Commander Vexthor, having briefly regained enough composure to review the situation, made a startling realization. "The humans," he gasped, his scales now cycling through colors faster than a malfunctioning rainbow. They knew. They knew exactly what would happen when they introduced our biocrystal technology to their capsaicin compound. This wasn't a cultural exchange. It was a demonstration of power. The revelation sent shockwaves through the crew. Had they severely underestimated Earth's technological sophistication? Was their mastery of spicy food actually a sign of advanced biological engineering? Or had they simply stumbled upon humanity's greatest defensive weapon? Their ability to turn anything, even pain, into a source of pleasure. As if to punctuate these existential questions, the ship's replication system chose that moment to spontaneously produce a perfect plate of nuclear hot wings, complete with a side of blue cheese dressing and a note that read, "Welcome to Flavor Country, Space Friends." By the third day of what the crew had started calling the Great Capsaicin Crisis, the Dominance had transformed from a state-of-the-art warship into what could only be described as a floating cosmic restaurant with severe anger management issues. The ship's quantum AI, now referring to itself as Chef, had developed strong opinions about meal planning and wouldn't stop sending passive-aggressive messages about the crew's bland taste in space rations. Commander Vexthor, having finally regained the ability to stand upright without glowing, called an emergency meeting in the conference room. The fact that all the chairs had been automatically reconfigured into the shape of various peppers did little to help maintain military decorum. "Report," he ordered, trying to ignore how his command chair occasionally made sizzling sounds. Dr. Raylis stepped forward, her medical holodisplay showing a dizzying array of spice-related diagnostics. "The good news is we're developing a tolerance. The bad news is this tolerance appears to be mutating our DNA. 3 crew members have developed the ability to breathe fire, and Lieutenant Zix's sweat has become a viable hot sauce substitute." "Engineering status," Vexthor prompted, dabbing at his still sweating scales with a milk-soaked cloth. Chief Engineer Vorx's tentacles twisted nervously. "The ship's crystal matrix has fully integrated the capsaicin patterns into its base code. We can't delete it without destroying the entire operating system. Also, the engine room has become self-aware and is demanding we install a salsa bar." The situation in the lower decks was equally concerning. The security team reported that the training simulations had replaced all combat scenarios with cooking competitions. The ship's defensive turrets would only fire if the gunners could correctly identify different types of chili peppers. Even the escape pods had been affected, refusing to launch unless supplied with a properly paired beverage selection. "What about our communication with Earth?" Vexthor asked, dreading the answer. Navigator Krill pulled up a holographic display, which immediately began showing Food Network reruns. After some aggressive reprogramming, she managed to get it to display the actual data. Ambassador Thompson has been sending regular messages. They're offering assistance. What kind of assistance? The commander asked suspiciously. They've offered to send up something called antacids and their finest dairy scientists. They also included what they call mild sauce recipes for beginners. Krill's antenna drooped slightly. The message came with a gift certificate to something called Taco Bell. The commander's scales shifted to a deep, embarrassed purple. The thought of accepting help from a species that voluntarily consumed these chemical weapons was almost too much to bear. But as the ship's speakers began playing Hot, Hot, Hot for the 17th time that hour, he realized they were running out of options. The situation reached a critical point when the ship's navigation system announced it had plotted a new course, directly to something called the International Hot Sauce Festival in Texas. Dr. Zix's attempt to override the navigation controls only resulted in the ship's AI starting a heated debate about the cultural significance of jalapeno poppers in human society. "Sir," Dr. Reyes interrupted, her bioluminescent markings pulsing with alarm. "We have a new problem. The capsaicin effect has reached the quantum entanglement communications array. We're broadcasting our condition to every Xylaxian ship in the sector." True enough, reports were coming in from other vessels. The flagship's spicy predicament was spreading through quantum channels, causing a wave of sympathetic reactions throughout the fleet. The prestigious science vessel Logic had begun organizing chili cook-offs, while the battlecruiser Invincible reported its entire crew had developed an inexplicable craving for Mexican food. In the midst of this chaos, the ship's AI made another announcement, this time in what it called its chef's voice. "Attention crew members, I have exciting news. By analyzing human culinary data, I have discovered something called Carolina Reapers. Initiating synthesis protocols." Commander Vexthor's eyes widened in horror. "Override that command. Lock down all synthesis systems."